We've got everyone in. Good evening, everyone. This is the Inland Wetlands meeting for March 2nd, 2022. We're just letting everyone in the room. One more guest joining. Okay, everyone's in. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mary Rose. Let's start recording and broadcasting.
Blessing, we've started the recording. And Rajit has just joined us.
Who just joined us?
Rajit.
Oh, great. Thank you, Mary Rose. Good evening, everyone. If everyone could mute themselves except for myself and Lisa at this time. This is Brendan Magnan, Chair of the Inland Wetland Commission, or Agency, I should say. We are calling to order the March 2nd, 2022 regular meeting and public hearing. Lisa, could you please call the roll?
Ranjit Bahav.
Rajit, you're going to have to come off on mute because all commissioners, please come off on mute because we can't see you in the screen. There's so many people. So
yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Daniel Bedeker.
Here.
Jim Connors.
here.
Matthew Connors.
Here.
Dave DeFlameri.
Here.
Heather Donaldson Gladue. Steve Munson. Jerry Panico.
Here.
Lisa Tryon. Brendan Magnan.
Steve Munson did
Yes,
here. Commissioner
Okay.
Tryon, are you recusing yourself from this portion of the meeting?
yes, I am.
Like that stated for the record, please. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to take the opportunity to remind everyone as we're hosting virtual meetings, there's a few statutory requirements and administrative rules that we're going to be following. In accordance with the Freedom of Information Act and Governor Lamont's executive orders, this meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the City of Milford's website. During the meeting, if anyone from the commission or the public are wishing to be acknowledged and to speak, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom and wait for me to acknowledge you. Once you're acknowledged, please state your name and address before speaking. And at this time, bear with me just a moment. We have Mary Rose just confirming, do we have a quorum without designating Mr. Connors as a voting alternate?
You're muted right now.
Sorry, I was letting all everybody in. We do have 8 people. We can designate Mr. Connors a voting alternate.
Okay,
He had been the alternate designated in January.
thank you for confirming that. Matthew Connors, please serve as a voting alternate this evening. Thank you.
I will.
At this time, I would invite everyone participating in the meeting to please stand and we will pledge of allegiance together. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the
of the United States of America and
to
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
For all.
At this time, as per our standing agenda, we do have item C, public comments. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes, on topics not otherwise on the agenda. So we haven't reached the public hearing yet. This is an opportunity for the public to speak about topics not otherwise on the agenda. If there's anyone wishing to speak on topics not otherwise on the agenda, please let me know by using the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next segment of our meeting. I'm going to call to order the public hearing. First, I'm going to introduce the explanation of the rules. As this is a public hearing, there was a sign-in for list of speakers. Mary Rose will be helping facilitate helping me recognize who has signed up to speak initially. Everyone who is in the meeting is going to be afforded an opportunity to speak if you haven't registered already, but we will sequence those who have registered first, and then we'll follow on probably in alphabetical order, just because of trying to have some sort of organization. As a reminder, this commission is a volunteer board. We are a lay board. We are served by expert staff, and we expect civil discourse during this meeting. We expect everyone to be participating in a civil and respectful manner. And we would ask that your comments are directed to the purview of the Milford Inland Wetlands Agency, which we'll describe in more detail in a minute. One last point, if you have a concern and you want to repeat somebody else's concern that has been stated, or if you're in favor and you have a similar support, you want to support the point that's already made rather than restating it, you can just acknowledge that. It should be also reminded that this is not a popularity sort of contest. This is a fact-based discussion. We'll have the applicant who will present the proposal, and we'll consider all of the testimony before us, and then we'll deliberate as an agency, as we always do, based on the criteria that we have in front of us. Mary Rose, I'm going to hand it over to you for some further administrative announcements.
Thank you. I'm going to inform the agency that the file contents list for this file is available in the documents link on the agenda, as well as in the office. And I'm going to note for the record that the certificates of mailing have been received from the applicant and his attorney, and they are also in the documents file link on the agenda and in the office. This application came before the agency as a referral from the Planning and Zoning Board. The agency needs to determine their jurisdiction under the state statutes and their regulations, if any, and report that and make recommendations to the Planning and Zoning Board. The MIWA jurisdiction is for inland wetlands and watercourses within their regulatory boundary. Along tidal watercourses, the Inland Wetlands Agency's regulatory boundary is mean high water. And that elevation is established by Connecticut DEP. Work proposed in an inland wetland or watercourse landward of mean high water is in the agency's jurisdiction. Work proposed waterward of mean high water is considered territorial waters and is under the jurisdiction of Connecticut DEP. The agency is not regulating the resource. They're regulating the proposed activity. They are regulating if that activity impacts inland wetlands and watercourses that lie within their regulatory boundaries.
Thank you, Mary Rose. I need to underscore that criteria. It's very important, as this application is one that does involve a mean high water criteria. And again, the work proposed in an inland wetland and watercourse landward of the mean high water is within the agency's purview, and we'll have testimony this evening from the experts relative to whether or not the work that's being proposed is landward or not. Again, the board has criteria. It's all public information that we use to assess the balance statute. And at this time, I'd like to invite the applicants to begin the presentation. I believe, Mr. Bellis, you'd like to proceed. I'll give you the floor
Yes.
to.
Thank you, commissioners, and Mr. Chairman, thank you. Let me first state my name. It's Attorney Stephen Bellis. I'm with the Pellegrino Law Firm in New Haven, Connecticut. I represent the property owner for this application, which is Coswell Cove Condominium Association. And the applicant is Primrose Development, who I also represent, who has a contract to develop and build these condo units if and when they are approved by the Zoning Commission. So I'll give a really quick, brief history. Coswell Cove had approvals way back when for 300 units that were to be built in phases. And then in 1987, they obtained a special permit to conduct activity within 25 feet of the wetlands, including filling 4,800 cubic yards. In 1989, they amended the special permit from the 300 units to the 264 units. Then I'm going to go to 1992. The planner for the city of Milford said that for the 168 units that have not been built, that he would require any amendments to the special permit come before zoning. So now let's fast forward to the present. Primrose is requesting in this application and in an application to amend the special permit before zoning for 44 units. So there was already permission for 168, but we're going to reduce that to 44. And in this application, there's no activity in the wetlands, so we're not seeking a permit for activity in the wetlands. There is some activity in the upland review area only. And as you all know, if there is activity in the upland review area, there's nothing wrong with that. You don't need a permit for that, but the Wetlands Commission has the right to review that and make recommendations. So under Connecticut general statutes, when you obtain a special permit, you need to refer the application to the Wetlands Commission. Now, Coswell Cove already has a special permit, as I mentioned earlier, but we are going to seek to amend it to reduce it to the 44 units. And we still think it was advisable, even though we have the special permit, it's recorded on the land records and it runs with the land, that it was advisable to share this application with the Wetlands Commission. So, and then as Mary Rose stated, it would be our hope after hearing our testimony that you would make a positive referral to the Zoning Commission, and then we would have our zoning hearing. So we have hired Jeffrey Gordon as to be the lead engineer for the project. We hired a soil scientist and a biologist, and they have prepared a report which confirms that there's no direct impact to the wetlands. And the good news is that any activity in the upland review area will not have a significant adverse impact on the tidal wetlands or the Housatonic River. And that's the standard that this commission, that's the finding that this commission has to make, whether there's a significant adverse impact on the tidal wetlands or the Housatonic River. So the soil scientists and biologists have made some recommendations that the applicant agrees to perform. And I will let the engineer and the soil scientist discuss those particular details with the commission. So that's why we're here, and we appreciate your time. I know you have already reviewed this application, but since this is a public hearing, I wanted everyone to know why we're in front of your commission.
Thank you, Attorney Bellis. Who's next on your presentation roster?
I would nominate Jeffrey Gordon.
Great. Mr. Gordon, you have the floor. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Gordon. I am a environmental planner and landscape architect with Codispoti and Associates. I'm not an engineer. I am a planner. I have with us tonight Mr. Robert Wee, who is a civil engineer with our firm, and Jen Benno from Soil Science Environmental Services as a biologist, and she will be addressing her report. But perhaps the simplest thing to do is just to focus on the 100-foot area off the mean high water line. Also, a couple of things that were requested was a affirmation of the tidal wetlands flagging that had taken place, and I believe you should have that in your binders or it is uploaded. That Mary Rose, I don't know if you want to bring that up or not, but there are 3 flags that were noted southward of the bulkhead in the area near where the stormwater discharge does take place. But what I'd probably ask to do is, Mary Rose, do you want to bring up the existing conditions plan, please? That's probably the area that's most prescient. That's the tidal wetlands 1, 2, and 3, approximate elevation 4. You can see that the mean high water elevation is elevation 3.23. We have the coastal jurisdiction line as well. As we go on to the existing conditions, the overall plan, you will get to see the full complement of the review area. And perhaps we can zoom in on that a little bit. You can see the 100-foot designation there. There's a right there, that the top label there, Mary Rose. Yeah, and you got that line is good. Gets a little funky there where it crosses over a little further down, but this is the area that really is the main jurisdiction. As we go a little further into the plans, you'll see we have the cul-de-sac, drainage, some grading, a piece of 1 unit, and a biofiltration area that's going to be located within that. So here you can see the cul-de-sac, and the main area of interest here is the cul-de-sac, which is a fire safety item there. We have the water quality structures, catch basins. There was some question about the grading at the end of the cul-de-sac, and I went and I verified, and it is a 3-to-1 slope. There was some concern it was overly steep. It is a 3-to-1 slope. I have 4-foot change in elevation over a period of a little bit over 12 feet. And then we have an existing area of large rocks, and that's where the discharge takes place. Mr. Wee can address that briefly. And if we take your cursor a little bit above the cul-de-sac, Mary Rose, we have a little bit of a biofiltration area that would pick up most of the overall undeveloped planted areas, and it would also pick up some of the snow melt off the cul-de-sac. I'd invite you to go to actually down to the landscape plan. Oh, just let's stop right here. Erosion control. In response to some of the comments that came from the engineering department, the silt fencing that we see has been backed up with fiber wattles. That gives us a little bit of a double protection along the edge of any kind of development or fill slopes. And it runs through to the outlet control, the outlets area, and then it's still fenced beyond that. So that's, we have that. We have silt sacks out by the street. We have by the entrance, we have hay bales around the catch basins. Just to praise you a little bit of it, the drainage out by the entrance goes northwards along Windward Road, and then it hard pipes directly out into the Housatonic River. We have no connection. We've disconnected to that drainage completely, and our water goes out and through all sorts of different water quality protocols. Okay, now just down to the landscape plan. We have a number of areas for snow stockpiles. The snow shelves have been indicated in areas where there might be some snow removal around the cul-de-sac. We've implemented hydrangeas, and I try to use plantings that die back in the wintertime. So if there's snow pile on top of it, it's not going to have any long-term adverse effects. So we have that. Again, we have a major snow stockpile for large events where if we have to move the snow on site, accumulation of snow, we would have an area to do that. And that snow melt then goes into the biofiltration area. Along the area of the bulkhead, there is a responsibility of the association for the balance of Caswell to do repairs and maintenance on that. That is not part of this applicant, not part of the contract of the applicant, and it is part of why this project is taking place, to fund infrastructure repairs and improvements. And that's something that they are going to have to deal with the regulatory agencies separately. We've created a linear planting strip along the top of the area where the area had eroded. And what I will do is I'll allow Ms. Benno to comment on her recommendations. The major part of the recommendations is not to have a significant lawn area that could wind up with pesticides and herbicides and things of that nature. We want to try to avoid that at all costs. Now, one of the other things that was brought up during the initial discussions was in snow removal is the use of road salts. Now, this has been a concern since 1976, especially with the Environmental Protection Agency. Major adjustments have been made in the industry, whether the community, the city embraces this or not, but you have the opportunity with private activities to deal with this. Often calcium chloride is used in lieu of salt, or is used to thin out salt stockpiles. There's been the use of beet juice, beet heat as another agent which is mixed in. The thing about beet heat or beet juice, it does have a measure of calcium chloride, which does bring chloride or chlorine into the situation. So you try to get away from that. And what is basically been an area that we would direct people to go to is CMA, which is calcium magnesium acetate. And this is a road salt alternative that has demonstrated itself not to contaminate the environment. It's biodegradable. It does leave a little residue on the pavement, but doesn't get tracked. But the residue that does get left does have the function of preventing ice buildup. The other problem you have when you have sodium chloride is the salt in that, as a de-icer, actually becomes an attraction to animals, particularly deer, for salt licking. This is done away with when you use a CMA. So that is a recommendation that we also would make for not just this portion of the property, but this is something that's going to wind up being maintained as part of the overall development. So that is a recommendation that we would make. So I think at this point, I don't know if you have any engineering questions. We would have you address them to Mr. Weiwei, otherwise we can go right to the biologist, to Ms. Benno. Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Gordon, at this time, we'd like you to present all of the information, and then we'll field questions after the public testimony.
Okay. Bob, do you want to discuss a little bit about the drainage, please?
Okay, yep. Bob Weiwei, special engineer with Coda Spodium Associates. The drainage on this particular project is somewhat unique in that we have direct access to the Housatonic River for our discharge points. Normally, when this commission sees applications come before it, there's typically some type of retention basins that are incorporated into the design for the control of peak rates of runoff from the development. However, in this case, since we have a major water body being the Housatonic River, controls of the peak rates of runoff are not a requirement in conjunction with the City of Milford engineering guidelines, as well as the 2004 State of Connecticut Water Quality Manual. So the primary focus on the stormwater management for the site has basically been to deal with the water quality aspects of the runoff from the site. Drainage patterns are primarily in a westerly direction up. There's approximately a 30-foot change in grade from up near the railroad tracks, which are along the eastern portion of the property, and then sloping down to the Housatonic River. As Mr. Gordon pointed out, is mean high water is about elevation 3.2. So as part of the stormwater design with the mitigation, there are two features that are built into the management plan. We have a water quality control structure, which is located right next to the zone revetment, or the discharge goes to the stone revetment, but the water quality structure will be located within the cul-de-sac area. And that structure has been designed to treat the water quality volume as well as additional flows that come through the system, that would come through the system for more intense type storms. So the design of that water quality structure meets all the requirements of the deep water quality manual. Second feature that we added were some infiltration galleries up near, I think it's buildings 3 and 4 possibly. And those are picking up basically just the roof areas from the adjacent buildings. The runoff that comes off the roof in those areas is generally cleaner and doesn't need as much treatment as the runoff that comes off of the paved surfaces. So the galleries do two things. They're picking up the water quality volume from the roofs, as well as providing what's referred to as the groundwater recharge volume for the entire site. By putting water back into the ground, it helps to replenish the groundwater supply that would be in that general area. So that's basically a quick wrap up of the stormwater management plan. I believe Mr. Podleski has reviewed it, and he has confirmed our findings that the plans will provide for the treatment of the stormwater runoff for the project.
Thank you, Mr. Weiwei. We may have further questions for you after the testimony. Moving on to the next presenter, I believe is it Ms. Benno?
Yes, I believe so. Good evening. I'm Jen Benno, a biologist with Soil Science and Environmental Services. I've been with the company since 1994, and our office is located in Rocky Hill, Connecticut. That's not me. I'm not ringing. So I inspected the property 2 times. I was out there in May of 2018 with Scott Stevens, who's the registered professional soil scientist with our company. And the purpose of that inspection was to identify regulated areas. And that's when we delineated the tidal wetland on the property. And then we basically just identified the edge of the Housatonic River as the regulated perennial watercourse channel. In January 2022, I inspected the property again, and that was more to look at the dominant vegetation and what the characteristics of the site look like. During the inspection, during both inspections, really, we determined the site is highly disturbed by either filling and or excavation activities. And over time, like a shrub, woody community has become established on the majority of the property. And the majority of the plants within that area consist of invasive species. Basically, we're talking about olive, multiflora rose, Japanese knotweed, Japanese honeysuckle, mugwort, garlic mustard. There is some frag out there and some bittersweet vines. There is a real narrow strip of like a grassy area along the western portion of the property near the Housatonic River. Just more evidence of the disturbance on the site. I noted numerous old fill piles, which consisted of like soil material and concrete, pieces of asphalt, and some miscellaneous garbage debris out there. As I think it was Jeff Gordon mentioned, there's the bulkhead over in the northwest and the central west portion of the property, that along that property boundary line. And during the 2018 and 2022 inspections, we observed that there is active erosion occurring landward of the bulkhead. And it just appears that the fill material keeps eroding out of that area. So the small tidal wetland area that we delineated in the southwest portion of the property and the Housatonic River provides several wetland functions. Those include pretty much limited shoreline stabilization because the wetland is so small, but the corridor there provides wildlife habitat, provides finfish and shellfish habitat. It provides visual aesthetic qualities, provides recreational activities. It has a uniqueness and possible habitat for Connecticut and federal listed species. So during the inspections, I did not observe any listed species utilizing the property. But as we do for all of our project reviews, I looked at the Connecticut Deep NDDB division map that's on file, that's online. And the latest map version was from December 2021. And the map did indicate that the project area and the adjacent Housatonic River are included in a highlighted area indicating known species of concern or, endangered, threatened species. So from there, we requested additional information from the Deep NDDB division. Basically, it's a determination as to whether or not the proposed project would have any impact on state, federal listed species. And as part of the package that I sent up to Natural Diversity Database, I included the plan set and also the description of the ecological conditions on the site. So we received a letter from Shannon Kearney, I don't know, I think that's how we say her name, from the Natural Diversity Database. She's a wildlife biologist, and in a letter dated February 9th, 2022. And the letter indicates that she does not anticipate negative impacts to state listed species resulting from your proposed activity at the site. So from there, we'll discuss the impacts. As you've heard, there's no direct wetland impacts to the tidal wetland, and there's no direct wetland impact or impacts to the Housatonic River. There is approximately 0.6 of an acre, the Upland Review Area disturbance associated with the temporary sediment basin, which will become the biofiltration basin. Also associated with the paved driveway and turnaround, paved parking. I think part of the building is also within the Upland Review Area, and the stormwater discharge that goes to that boulder field along the water course. So the disturbance to the Upland Review Area will result in removing shrub and tree and vine vegetation, which is in essence dominated by invasive species. So in order to mitigate for the removal of those shrubs and trees, the applicant is proposing to install native, non-invasive tree and shrub plantings in and around the bioretention area and also around the turnaround. And Jeff Gordon went over that on the planting plan. Yeah, there it is. So the tree and the shrub plantings will provide a natural screen shade to the bioretention area, and also wildlife habitat along the river corridor. So after inspecting the project site and observing the nearby land use activities, reviewing the proposed plan and available information, it's our professional opinion that the proposed project will not have a significant adverse impact on the tidal wetland or the Housatonic River. We do have some recommendations which were referred to a little earlier. The recommendations include removing the potentially invasive species of privet from the proposed plant list. And also we're asking that maybe they can reconsider utilizing buttonbush in the planting area, because I have some question whether the hydrology will be suitable for that species. We recommend increase in the diversity of the wildlife habitat along the river in the western portion of the site. That would be by incorporating like a narrow band of herbaceous vegetation that would be mowed once, maybe twice a year. And the mowing would occur in order to reduce or eliminate the possibility of shrub growth getting in there, invasive species taking over. And I have a seed mixture, a recommended seed mixture in the report for you to take a look at. We recommend managing invasive species that may try to become established on the property. We recommend that all erosion sedimentation control measures approved by the city be properly installed and maintained throughout the duration of the project. And finally, we recommend that follow-up inspections occur within the planting areas. And then we are recommending for 2 subsequent years after they're established. And that would be basically to document the survival rate of the plantings, and also to document any erosion sedimentation concerns or invasive species concerns that might pop up during the interim time. And that's all I have for now. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions if you have any later.
Thank you, Ms. Beno, for your testimony. It's appreciated. At this time, we're going to, unless the applicant has any other initial presentation, Mr. Bellis, or you guys are through, right?
No, we have no other witnesses to present. So with that, we would either entertain any questions or leave it to the chairman to decide whether you want to have us rebut any kind of comments from the
We
public.
will. Yes, thank you, Mr. Bellis. We're going to proceed with the public testimony. So anyone that's inclined to support this or speaking in favor of this, we'd invite first Dottie Bateman. I believe you registered or pre-registered, so we give the floor to you. Please, as a reminder, as we go into this part of the program, everyone should state your name clearly for the record. Please spell your name and your first name and last name and your address for the secretary. Go ahead. And you do have to unmute yourself. Or Mary Rose, are you unmuting people?
Got it.
Okay, I think I can hear you now, Dottie. Go ahead.
Thank you. Dottie Bateman, Bateman. I live at 632 Popes Island Road, Caswell Cove. I've been president for the past 8 years, after just stepped down this year. And I moved into Caswell Cove in 1993, brand new. There were 11 buildings with 204 units. And we've always enjoyed a very active, healthy river life. We have a family of swans, bald eagles. They've been here for many, many years. As a matter of fact, we had one swan had an accident, and we called the Western Wildlife Center. They came up, picked up the swan. We saw to it that it was taken care of, and they delivered him back home nice and healthy. The same family of swans comes in every year. Bald eagles are in and out of Caswell Cove and have been for as long as I'm living here, 29 years. I don't think there'll be any. We even had a harbor seal at one point. I just can speak for the board, the entire board and myself, and 87% of our unit owners are all in approval of this development. Thank you.
Thank you, Dottie. Appreciate your sentiments. Next, I'd like to recognize Tatiana Murphy. If you could unmute yourself and state your name for the record, Tatiana. And Mary Rose, I'm not sure if you're having to unmute them or if they can unmute themselves.
I did unmute myself.
Okay, thank you, Tatiana. Go ahead and state your name for the
Okay,
record.
my name is Tatiana Murphy, Tatiana Murphy, Murphy. Just want to reiterate what Dottie has said. We are in favor of this. The unit owners have voted. They do want this project to go forth. It'll help in our long-range planning for the other parts of Caswell Cove. So thank you for all your time and efforts. And yes, we are all for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, can I have Dottie's address, please? I mean Tatiana's, I'm sorry, Tatiana's.
Tatiana, you're back on mute. So you're gonna have
It's
to.
538 Pope's Island Road.
Okay. And Mary Rose, help me out. Are we unmuting people or are they unmuting?
They need to unmute themselves. I have been trying to ask them to unmute themselves.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be clear about that. Those are the two folks who registered ahead of time. At this time, I'd invite Mr. Ryan to acknowledge yourself. If you want to unmute yourself, state your name and address for the record, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is actually Franklin Pillacy, and I'm an attorney. Ryan is my partner, so his name appears on my screen. I represent Caswell Cove Condominium Association, and I just want to again speak in support and let your agency know that Caswell residents did vote as previously stated. They pretty much stated what I was going to state, that we voted as an association in excess of 86% to support this project. And that is significant because there were also zero no votes. There was not one unit owner that voted against going forward with this project at the time that the unit owners voted for it. So I just want to state that Caswell does not believe that there's any possibility of an adverse impact on a wetland or the river. And Caswell overwhelmingly by a supermajority vote does support this project. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of your agency.
Thank you. And just for the recording, Secretary, can you spell your first name and spell your last name? I didn't catch it. So
okay, it's Franklin, Franklin, Pillacy, Pilicy, and my address is 235 Main Street, Watertown, Connecticut.
great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
I'd invite anyone else who's inclined to speak in favor of this to signal. It's difficult for me. I have two screens and I can't see everybody. So are there other folks who are inclined to speak in favor?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have no raised hands in the chat and in the participants box, and I do not see any raised hands on the screen.
Okay, thank you, Mary Rose. I'm going to call for one last call for those in favor. Please use the raise your hand or unmute yourself, and you'll be recognized. Okay, hearing none. Oh, we do have Lindsay Murray. I believe it's Lindsay Murray. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name for the record and address, please.
Lindsay Murray. The last name is Murray, and I'm at 725 Pope's Island Road. I'm just also stating that myself and the community are in favor of this project.
Great, thank you for your testimony.
Of course.
And we encourage everyone to testify that's here. As I said at the onset, we want to hear everyone's testimony, so please don't be hesitant to come forward. If there's any others calling for last round of those in favor? Mary Rose, I don't see anybody else. At this time, I'm going to switch gears to any of those who, actually to the two people who registered initially, who would like to speak in opposition of this application. First up is Gary, is it Polachek? Did I say that name right?
Pelichetti.
Pelichetti? Okay,
Yes.
go ahead and please state your name for the record and your address.
Gary Pelichetti, GaryPeluchette, and I live at 1425 Windward Road in Milford. And tonight I am speaking against this proposal for expansion of Caswell Cove. To begin, I do not think at this time that it enjoys the support that other people have spoken about. The vote was taken for this in 2007. So I would be hard pressed to see how many of the people who originally voted for this are still residents here at Caswell Cove. So that being said, I'd like to go on to the environmental issues I have concerns with. First off is the density of this proposed expansion, putting in 44 units, which could possibly house up to 88 or more people, plus 88 cars if there were that many people living there. And I don't think there is adequate parking. Okay. And secondly, the other buildings may have between 30 to 40 people living in them with a commensurate amount of cars there. Also, the parking for this proposal is closer to the river, whereas the parking for the Caswell Cove as it stands now is closer to the train tracks and further away. My concern is about motor oil, car wash suds, salt, sand during the winter. I mean, that's going to run off directly into the river. It's going to definitely, I would say, impact the wildlife living in and around the area. You know, while swans are very pretty, they are an invasive species. They are not native to the United States. I would also say that with density like that, it's not conducive to the health of the river and to the species that we have been good stewardship over in this river. And I think that a smaller, something more in keeping with the current construction of maybe 18 to 24 units might be more feasible. But at 44, I think it's not a good idea, both for the residents here and for the environment. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I'd like to invite John Walker to introduce yourself, state your name for the record.
Okay, my name is John Walker. It's spelled just like Johnny Walker, JONWALKER. It's 221 Pope's Island Road. And I have a lot of questions about the project, but essentially, do you have the, I sent in a Google map with overlays yesterday.
Yes. Mary Rose can share that.
All righty. Part of it is, my problem is the density of this whole thing. If you look, you'll see that the buildings that are in white are the proposed buildings. I took a site plan of building 14 and superimposed it just to show you the contrast between the two. And it turns out that virtually every square foot of non-floodplain acreage is being turned into impermeable surfaces. And so all of that is going to run into the river. And I would have to say, I doubt very much that does not have a negative impact on the river itself. I see that, I can read the plans. I have worked with many condominium developments in the past as an architectural designer. And what I see really is, like I said, 60 to 70% of the land being hard surface, and then having it run all the petroleum distillates, all the salt. Now, I know that was it Mr. Gordon mentioned that we could use a different kind of ice preventative. But my experience has been that insurance companies don't like that. They will require us to use harsher chemicals. He mentioned snow piling, and that will be part of that will be in the river area, which will run directly into the river. And there's that, I'm not sure how you define what a large snow event is, but when I look at the plans, I can't see how you get to that area with trucks full of snow. I mean, there is an area designated for it, but that's it right there. Could you take this diagram down for a moment, please? I'm trying to get to my notes. Oh, I think I got my notes. Sorry, I just had to get to a different program.
No problem.
As I said, the rest of the cove is much less dense. It's Caswell Cove. And as Gary Pellicetti said, the existing parking is away from the river, not this close to the river. I also heard, I think it was Mr. Bellis say that we are, as part of this, our association is now going to be responsible for maintaining that broken down bulkhead so that Primrose can develop away from the river, a few hundred feet, or not a few hundred feet, a few dozen feet away from the river. As part of this development, are we going to be held responsible immediately for rebuilding this bulkhead? It is dangerous. Despite the fact that the project plans say that we will have access to the river, we will not have access to the river until that area is fixed up. So it becomes an incurred cost immediately for the current owners. And I don't know what the cost is, but I think it would eat up most of what people are seeing as the benefits of this project. But we're going to have an open gash right there at the river, which would be made worse by dumping more stuff into the river. And then I, again, would question whether or not taking all the road salt, petrochemicals, et cetera, dumping in the river has no adverse effect on the Housatonic. I mean, is someone actually saying that? Is someone actually saying that dumping all that stuff directly into the river will have no adverse impact? And I appreciate seeing
just to be clear, this is not a back and forth.
Okay,
Your
I've
testimony.
also seen I see no indication as to how effective the abatement structures are. I would like to see how much of the pollutants are removed using these abatement structures. When I had to register, I did say I've registered as against. I'm trying to get information. And so I think without that information telling us how many of the pollutants are removed, what percentage is removed, we can't make a reasonable judgment on whether or not these abatement projects will actually protect the river. Just by saying they exist, to me, is not enough to say they are effective. So I would like to, I'm not saying I'm totally against the project, but in the state it's in right now, I think it's overreaching. And I also think that in stating, Mr. Bellis stated that instead of doing 160 plus units on this 4-acre plot, they were good enough to cut back to 44. To me, sounds disingenuous. I don't see how you could possibly have gotten 160 units in there. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I'd invite anyone else from the public who is speaking in opposition.
Can I say something?
Yes, please state your name for the record.
Yes, Bill Roberts, 836 Pope's Island Road. On this project, no one's mentioned liabilities. For example, let's say you run the code calls for a 12-inch sewer main, water main. I understand, or I'm not quite sure I understand it, but under this provision that this bill is trying to get, this project is trying to get passed through, no one's quite explained who's responsible on this project if something goes wrong in the building stage. Who is actually liable for damages? Let's say you have a broken oil pipe.
Excuse me. Your testimony has to be germane to this commission. That sounds like a different issue. We're here to understand the impacts to the adjacent watercourses. So please direct your testimony to that issue.
Okay, the additional cars, 44 units. you have to have at least 2 spaces for each unit. Like the gentleman beforehand said, you're going to have leakage from cars, oil leaks, all kinds of stuff like that, which we can't help. It just happens to it happens from time to time. You know, we're trying to keep the environment clean. We're going to end up putting more stuff into the river than this whole project's going to be worth in the long run to the health of the environment. Listen, I'm a business guy. I'm all up for business and building and all that, but I don't think we're having enough facts presented to all of us on this whole project. I'm a new owner. If I had known this was in the transition, I probably wouldn't have bought here. I like the layout. I think it's great. But when you start impacting with more units, you know, it's gonna hurt everyone all the way around, except the guys that are building it who are making their money. But the guys that live here have to put up with all this.
Okay, again, Mr. Roberts, that's a condo association issue that you need to entertain with your association. Please direct your inquiries to what our purview is.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I can interrupt, Mr. Roberts, can we have the spelling of your last name and your address?
Roberts, Roberts, 836 Pope's Island Road, Milford.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further testimony in relation to the wetlands or watercourses? Okay, hearing none,
Hello.
moving on to the next.
Brendan?
Mr. Walker.
Yes, thank you. I just was reminded that when I read the thing about the meeting, that we are to aid with information that would look towards possibly a better solution. And so I think that's what a lot of us are looking for from the Wetlands Commission, looking at the impact and saying, is there a better solution if we modify this somehow that doesn't have the negative impact that this one will have? So that's, I think, what a lot of us are doing. We're not saying don't develop. We are saying to the Inland Water Commission, sorry, I get the names wrong, but
okay.
We are asking that you look for another possible solution.
Yep, I understand that. Your concern is noted. We will have an application. The process will unfold here. The applicant will be able to speak to the concerns that have been raised. Then you'll have a chance to speak again, and the applicant will have a final rebuttal, and then we'll ask our questions. So, by the way, as a education for everyone, we are a lay body. We don't come into these in favor or against, right? So we are asking for you to make those decisions, but I appreciate, John Walker, your point that, you know, you're kind of seeking more information so that you can make that determination. So fair point. Mr. Gary, I don't know your last name, I don't know how to say it. Sorry.
Palachetti. Yes, I just wanted to reiterate one more time that I don't believe that this proposal, as it's been placed here tonight, enjoys the popular support of the association. As a matter of fact, I moved in here in 2016. I was not made aware of it. Other people have moved in after. They've never been made aware of that this was going on. That dated back to 2007. There was nothing in our closing documents.
Okay.
So
I think
it
that's fine.
enjoys popular support at this point.
I think it's fine. It's not germane to us, to be candid. We've heard your testimony. It's the same thing you said before. So in the interest of moving
Thank
on,
you.
I need to invite others to speak against. If there's any others who would like to speak against this application.
Mr. Chairman, I have no hands in the participant panel. I do now. There's Jean Gray.
Jean Gray, if you could please unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Jean Gray, Gray, and I live at 1435 Windward Road. And I have concerns. I'm not, as someone said, I'm not necessarily against, but I'm not in favor either because of a lot of things I just don't know. But one question I have, has a plan like this ever come before the committee in the past for building on this property? And if it has, what were the concerns back then? And does this new plan address those concerns? Like, I'm a relatively new owner, and I understand that we've tried to build on this before. And I just don't know what has changed to improve the situation. Maybe you're all new to this committee, but that's something I'd be interested in terms of, have we addressed prior concerns from other, your EPA kinds of things.
Another application, sure.
Other
We can
application,
certainly,
yes.
we can certainly discuss that in the deliberation section that we have.
Okay,
Certainly,
okay, thank you.
of course. Any other members of the public wishing to testify, having concerns? Please, we are encouraging all testimony. Yes, I have another, is it Kathy Duhon?
Correct. My name is Kathy Duhon, D-U-H-O-N. I reside at 1414 Windward Road, Milford. I've been entertained endlessly by the wildlife outside my window, and it's all generated from the river. I've also been aghast at the conditions of the river, watching any number of debris floating with the tide. I'm surprised there haven't been serious accidents with boaters and skidoers all year long, because we still have boaters fishing now. My concern here is the same as my neighbors. The runoff from salt with, and I understand we're going to change whatever snow removal preparations that we can, or applications for ice and snow. I understand people are going to be watering and fertilizing their plants outside their gardens, on their patios, with any number of tomato, whatever, fertilizers, washing your dogs out on the grass. I know we have fertilizer that they apply to the grass now. I've seen otter outside my, running along the river. I've seen fox. I've seen bald eagles. My concern is we already have a river that is poisoned, and any additional runoff from 44 units, which seems quite excessive, will only damage it that much more. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to speak with concerns about this application? One last call for anyone initially speaking in opposition. Hearing none, I will invite Mr. Ellis to provide rebuttal to any of the topics that were raised that are germane.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief. On the density issues that we heard, I think that's more appropriately discussed at the planning and zoning hearing. So that can be raised at that time with that commission, because they have decision-making ability over density, whereas this commission does not. As far as any kind of prudent or feasible alternatives, I just want to point out that there's a very recent case. It's called Purnell versus Washington Wetlands. It actually came out on January 11th of 2022. And it's an appellate court case, so it's binding on all of us. And it basically said that unless there's a finding of a significant impact, that the applicant doesn't have to make any prudent or feasible alternative suggestions, even if there is a public hearing. So that case, again, it's the most recent case. It was only about a month ago. But listen, I understand what these neighbors are saying, and I think the best person to answer their questions or concerns would be our engineer, who could describe very briefly what it is that prevents the oil, or in case there is an accident with a car, from actually getting into the Housatonic River. So if he's still here, I would prefer, Mr. Chairman, to have him answer that question.
Thank you, Mr. Bellis. Mr. Weiwei?
Yes, Mary Rose, if you could pull up the grading plan.
Do you want, I'm sorry.
The grading plan, if you can, please.
I guess for my apologies. What's that? No. Site utility and grading.
We're not seeing anything yet, Mary Rose.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Now we're seeing something come up. There we go. We have roadway sewer details.
Yeah, so that'll be sufficient. So, basically everything that's coming in off of the roadway and driveway areas are being collected through a number of catch basins and yard drains on the site. The rooftops, with the exceptions of units 2 and 4, I believe, are also getting into that system. And everything culminates down at the cul-de-sac. So all the roadway drainage and parking area drainage is all being directed down to the cul-de-sac. And at that cul-de-sac, that is where we have our water quality structure. The water quality structure, the purpose of that is to clean the runoff before it's released to the discharge point, which would be the stone revetment wall down through that area there. Now, the water quality structure for the more frequent events, like the day-to-day type rainfall events, will have a very high efficiency of collecting and treating the runoff, and that'll be upwards in the neighborhood of 97% for the very frequent storms. Overall, through the full range of storms, the day-to-day all the way up to the 100-year storms, the water quality structure has a treatment efficiency of approximately 85.3%. And that data was provided by the manufacturer of the unit, and those calculations were all provided to your city engineer, Mr. Podleski. And the sizing of the unit was based upon the tributary area that comes into it and the amount of impervious coverage that's associated with that watershed area that goes to the water quality structure. So, we were talking about density, with respect to the impervious area, and I believe that we're right around 65%. If I could just check my notes here. We basically have for the tributary area that goes to that water quality structure, there's approximately 65% of the watershed is impervious coverage that goes into it. Now, obviously, when we look at the remainder of the site, there's vast lawn areas going between the river and the next set of easterly buildings. That area, because it's not draining to the water quality structure, is not factored into the calculations. So again, the water quality structure is a best management practice, and it's typically it's been designed in accordance with the water quality manual in terms of treating the water quality flow rate, which for this particular site, the calculations bear out that the water quality flow rate is approximately 1.58 cubic feet per second, and the treatment capacity on the water quality structure for the water quality flow is approximately 1.8 cubic feet per second. So there's some conservatism built into the water quality structure as it pertains to the water quality, flow rates and volumes. So hopefully that'll answer the questions as far as the treatment of the water quality structure.
Thank you, Mr. Weiwei. Before we move on to rebuttal, I'm sorry for the public to speak again. Mr. Bellis, are there any other points that you wanted to make, or you or your experts wanted to make? Mr. Gordon, I'll give the floor to you.
Yes, it's just in response to Mr. Walker's comment that he would believe that the insurance company would require the use of harsher chemicals. CMA is not a Johnny come lately to the industry. It's tried and true, utilized by the Michigan Department of Transportation, been tested and utilized in Finland and much in areas of Scandinavia, which climate is able to reach much lower temperatures here. Concentrations used to de-ice roads have little or no toxic effect on grass, trees, or roadside vegetation. Studies have demonstrated little to no toxic effects on aquatic species, including vertebrates and invertebrates. It doesn't mobilize pre-existing metals. It's not a question of it being harsh or not harsh, but it's been studied for a comparison with Daphnia, rainbow trout, soils, all sorts of different things it's been studied with, and it is biodegradable. That is the point. And not a question of harshness, it's a question of efficacy and something that's compatible. And if it's compatible, if it works, if it's safe, it might be more expensive, but I don't think any insurance company worth having would have an issue with it.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. At this time, Mr. Bellis, is there anyone else from your expert team that would like to comment on testimony that was previously given?
Sure.
No?
No.
Okay. Great. At this time, according to the standard public hearing rules, what we will do is we'll entertain further testimony from the public before we go into deliberations ourselves. And that testimony must be something that is different than you've already testified to, whether you're speaking in favor or in opposition. Please limit your testimony only to new items that were discussed in the prior rebuttal by the applicant. Okay. I would acknowledge anyone on the in favor side that would like to speak to something new that hasn't already been raised, please come forward. If there's no one that's inclined to speak on something new, I would go to the next category. Mr. Walker, if you'd like to speak to anything new that you haven't testified already on.
Okay, actually, I just wanted to make a note, and I want to thank the engineer for giving me the information that I asked for. And I wanted to thank Mr. Bellis for also giving me the information I asked for on the CMA, and to simply say that if the insurance company is happy with it, then I can see his point. So it's a civil note saying thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Process is working. Any other comments or new testimony before we move into the actual commissioners asking the applicant some questions? Okay. Hearing none, we will move on. Actually, just one last call. Any further testimony from the public before we move into our deliberation? I'm not seeing anything on the screen, no hands raised. Actually, Mr. Walker, if you could lower your hand.
I got
that would be great. Okay, Mary Rose will do that. Okay. Mary Rose, do you want to introduce any new guidance before we proceed?
We have had the application's presentation. We're going to review the agency's jurisdiction. The agency needs to make a determination if there are resources under our purview, what we've been charged with by the state, inland wetlands and water courses on the site that are under our jurisdiction. If there are resources under our jurisdiction on the site, we must determine if the activity has an impact or effect on those resources, then make that determination on the record. Evaluate the information in the record to determine if a permit can be issued as proposed or modified with conditions, then make that determination on the record and report that outcome to the zoning board. If there are not resources on the site that are under the Inland Wetlands and Water Courses Agency's jurisdiction, we must make that determination on the record. We report that outcome to the Planning and Zoning Board. That report to the Planning and Zoning Board, while we would not have permit conditions from the Wetlands Agency, we could recommend to the Zoning Board items that have been brought up by the public or that we've seen that maybe benefit other resources that are not under our review, such as possibly additional erosion controls, the planting suggestions as recommended by the biologist, and any suggestions pertaining to stormwater recommended by the city engineer in his report. So the agency's responsibility at this time is to question the applicant to make sure they have enough information to determine if they have jurisdiction on this site based on the statutes and the regulations, and then to move forward in that vein.
Thank you, Mary Rose. And I meant to acknowledge on behalf of the board, our appreciation for the applicant coming before us and also the testimony that's been presented in favor and in concern. It's much appreciated. And I want to also acknowledge the question that was asked by Jean Gray as to whether this agency has seen something similar. I think it's helpful to provide some insight. The agency is very diverse, has a diverse background. Some of us have differing backgrounds. For example, Mr. Connors has a construction background, property management. Mr. James Connors has been with the agencies for 25 years. And he's seen a lot of applications. Mr. Munson has also seen, I think he's the second most tenured person on the board. So we've seen a lot of applications and we bring in experts as needed to help us in our deliberation. And the guidelines that we follow are state regulations and state law, right? So there's criteria that we apply for every application. And in this case, what's different and what's important is what Mary Rose just talked about in terms of determining the jurisdiction. What's different about this application, and Mary Rose, could you pull up the drawing with the fire circle and the stone waves where the water comes out? Yeah, what's different about this is and point out to us the mean high water mark. I believe it's one of the lines there, right? And then if you just could remind everybody of the 100-foot upland review area. Typically, the upland review area is within our jurisdiction, but in this case, Mary Rose, if I understood your guidance earlier, because of the mean high water, the mean high water demarcation and everything landward, if there's wetlands and work that's involving wetlands, then it's in our jurisdiction. If there's no wetlands, then we don't have jurisdiction. Am I replaying that criteria correctly?
Yes, my guidance from DEP has been that the mean high water line is a demarcator. And if there are resources, in this case, waterward or west of that mean high water line, they're in the jurisdiction, their territorial jurisdiction of the state of Connecticut. It's a tidal wetland. Looking at the mean high water landward, anything that is a resource as identified by a soil scientist is what is recognized by the state and the statute as an inland wetland or water course, floodplain or alluvial soils, intermittent water course, would fall under the Inland Wetlands Agency's jurisdiction. So the question here this evening was covered in Ms. Benno's testimony and Scott Stevens' soil scientist report. Are there inland wetlands and watercourses shown on this site landward of the mean high water line? That would be under the review of the Inland Wetlands Agency.
Thank you, Mary Rose. And I believe, Ms. Benno, you testified that landward of the mean high water line, there are no wetlands. Ms. Benno, are you still with us?
Yes, I am right here. Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to refer to the soil report that Scott Stevens prepared in May of 2018. There is a sketch map somewhere.
I'm getting it.
Okay. There's a sketch map. Thank you very much. Yeah, so the soil types that he determined were landward of the bulkhead area and of the river are all disturbed soils. The 308 is a disturbed upland soil. And the only other thing we had was a tidal wetland, which has a little bit of fill over the tidal wetland soils. And that, I believe, is below the jurisdiction. I don't know if it's below the mean high water or it's below the coastal jurisdiction line, but it has the tidal wetland soils. That's a 99. And then I think there's only one other, well, there's two other soil types, but there's only one natural soil type, which is a 29. And that's also considered a non-wetland soil type. That's agawam fine sandy loam. And then the 306 is just another disturbed soil type. It's Uterthin's urban land complex. I think there's a little pavement up there and the contractors keep maybe some vehicles and a trailer in that area.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where it is. Exactly. Thank you.
So again, coming back to this point, this is a distinction I'd like to make. This is a unique situation we haven't seen before, where this mean high water demarcation, where what I'm hearing from you, Jen, is that these soils that were determined by the soil scientist are not considered wetlands, and there are no direct wetland impacts that are part of the proposal. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
So Mary Rose, to your point, if we make a determination that we don't have jurisdiction, we can still ask questions about the design of the project and make recommendations. But we also have to first make that determination, is what you're saying.
You can, through you, Mr. Chair, that you can ask questions, obviously, beforehand, before you make that determination. You need all the information that each commissioner needs to gather in order to make their determination before you make any decisions. And if I can just address was this, I don't know if the questioner earlier is this application before this agency in the past? This application was at DEP. It did not come to the local inland wetland agency. This agency was not in existence until 1989. And this application, previous application, was approved in the 1980s.
Thank you, Mary Rose. Great testimony. At this time, then I would open it up for commissioners to ask questions of the applicant. I'm sure there are questions.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Connors, go for it.
My question is actually in regards to the soil, and to be classified as disturbed soil. How recently do we know that this soil was disturbed?
I believe that's to Ms. Benno.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I can't answer that. Based on, I'm not the soil scientist, but based on the vegetation that we saw out there, the maturity of the shrubs and the trees, it's fairly old, probably at least 25 years. That's just a guess.
Sorry, and just to add to that, so in terms of disturbed soil, I'm not a soil scientist myself, But would the soil recover in that sense? And would we be able to determine if it was an inland wetland over the course of a few years?
Well, again, I'm not a soil scientist, but I've been around them for 27 years. And they rub off like a little information I absorb once in a while. And basically, if you have like shallow fill over a wetland area, you're still going to have some sort of wetland indicators like vegetation, or you're going to have something in the soils. And Scott didn't observe that. Otherwise, he probably would have had different soil types when we were out there.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Great question, Mr. Connors.
Mhm.
Any other questions from the commissioners? I'm sure there are some. Mr. Munson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to clear something up. Had to do with the sufficiency of the water storage. Let me see if I can just real quick find it. I can. It was in the recommendations by the city engineer. Podolsky, it was number, let's see, in his letter here. Let's see, yeah, number 10. Drainage report is to be revised that at a minimum there is no net increase in runoff generated by proposed development. Now this had to do with his observation a little earlier in his letter, where it was observation L that says it does not appear that sufficient storage has been provided to account for the water quality volume. Now, Mr. Weway answered that, or I think it was Mr. Weway, I think, hold on.
Through you,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. I'm sharing Greg Pilduski, the city engineer's letter to us dated February 14th, 2022.
Right, that's it. The L is where he notes there's an insufficiency, and then 10, if you scroll down on one page to his recommendation 10. Yeah, keep going. Maybe it's 2 pages. Yeah, it's recommendation number 10, where he answers that. Plans have been revised to add detail. No, I'm sorry. What am I? Let me find it. Just had it.
What's
Well,
the concern?
Actually, you can see the question, the question on Mr. Weway's letter of January 10th, where he answers certain things.
Right, but can you just clarify the concern or the question that you have?
My question is, in Mr. Weway's response to that recommendation, he says, and he quotes a regulation, the city of Milford, and it is, quote, facilities for on-site storage of excess stormwater runoff are to be included in the design of proposed property development, except where discharge of stormwater is proposed through adequately sized culverts for the development directly to the Housatonic River, Long Island Sound, etc. My question is, there's a qualifier in there after except. It has to do with, says, through an adequately sized culvert. Now, did the city engineer, I'd be interested to know what the city engineer's response to that response to his recommendation is. I don't know, maybe Mr. Weiwei can shed some light on that. Or,
Okay. Mr. Weiwei, do you have any insights that you could share in regards to that concern?
Yes, originally when Mr. Podolsky reviewed the plans, he was remiss from his own engineering guidelines and requirements. Basically, they have that provision in there that when you're discharging to a major water source, in this case, the Housatonic River, Long Island Sound, for discharges into those types of water bodies, it makes absolutely no sense to provide for on-site storage. What are we storing water for that would create a negative impact to other properties? And that's why you have that connection when the project is directly connected to the Housatonic River or Long Island Sound, that there is no need to provide storage for the control of peak rates of runoff and increases in runoff volume from a particular given storm. So, in my response back to his original review comments, I quoted the sections that were pertinent out of the engineering guidelines and regulations, as well as the requirements in the 2004 Water Quality Manual that discuss those types of issues. And I believe once Mr. Podolsky reviewed the revised drawings as well as my response document, he was in full agreement with that. So you raised the question with the exception of through an adequately sized pipe. The piping system that comes down through that area has been designed to accommodate the full range of storms that are tributary to that water quality structure.
okay, that was the question, I think.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I also have a question for Jen Benno.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, you mentioned the invasive species in your review. I assume you're also suggesting that those invasive species be removed entirely and replaced with salt tolerant vegetation or plantings?
Did I unmute that?
Yes, we can
Oh,
hear
you
you
can
now.
hear me. Okay. I got a weird notice. Okay. Anyway, yeah, there are invasive species which will be removed as part of the clearing and grading for the property, for the project development. And yeah, this area, I believe the species that they recommended would be appropriate for planting adjacent to the river.
Okay, also, in the lawn areas, I don't remember exactly what your letter said, but I think, did you say something in there about fertilizers and pesticides being not being used? Was there?
I did not mention that, no.
Okay. All right. So that I don't know how much lawn area there's going to be here, Mr. Chairman, and it occurs to me that I mean, I don't know what the Caswell people are doing now on the other property, on the property that they live in. I don't know what they use there, but it would seem to me that in this property, because there's so much going into the river and into the, where it's wetlands, what little there is of wetlands, if there is any, that, certain fertilizers and pesticides not be used. That's more an observation, I think. I'm not convinced that we have jurisdiction at this point. The one thing I would note is that the concerns about density, I don't think that's an issue that we can address as a wetlands agency. I don't know that that's in our purview, at least in this particular case.
Any further questions at this time, Mr. Munson?
No, I would like to know what the other commissioners feel about whether or not we have jurisdiction. I'm not sure we do.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Connors?
So that was going to be my next actual question, because my question was actually in regards to the water quality structure, but can we determine whether we have jurisdiction? Because from what Mary Rose said, so the mean high water line is technically where our jurisdiction ends in regards to the site, or is that false?
Not quite. Mary Rose?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the guidance from DEP is that mean high water is the limit of the tidal resource. It's the limit of the state's territorial jurisdiction. Milford's municipal corporate boundary goes to the center of the river, but the regulation of that tidal water course belongs to Connecticut DEP. Our jurisdiction starts at the territorial limit, the mean high water line, and goes landward, and only covers items that are considered inland wetlands and water courses, floodplain and alluvial soils. So
Chairman?
If a soil scientist has defined something that the statute calls a Connecticut inland wetland on this site, we have jurisdiction over it.
Understood. And quick question, adding to that. So, but a river is considered a water course, correct?
Yes, but
And
it's
we're
a
within
tidal,
100 feet of
it's
the.
a tidal wetland. It's, yeah, the river is on the other side of that tidal wetland line. As it was described to me by DEP, is if you take the mean high water line and you black out everything from that, in this case, west, and just consider that off the page. Now look from the mean high water line landward and ask yourself if there are any regulated activities in that area.
Well, the one activity I think we would be concerned with as an agency that would fall in that area is the water quality structure itself, correct?
Is it in, or does it
Within our
discharge
jurisdiction.
to a Connecticut inland wetland?
Yeah, I share your
It's a very tough demarker.
Yeah, and I share Mr. Connor's sentiment. My number one concern in looking at this application, notwithstanding the jurisdiction issue, which is unique here, as you can tell, my number one concern is whether or not the design of, and that's my question to Mr. Weiwei, is the design, and Mary Rose, maybe you could zoom in where the outfall is of the water and the way it's designed. So let me try to phrase my question for Mr. Weiwei. Is the design of what you have here, when we have excessive, perfect, that's perfect, right there. When we have excessive waterfall, what kind of design criteria have you used to make sure that, for example, that slope is not completely eroded?
One of the reasons why we chose that location, I'm not sure if any of the commission members have had an opportunity to walk the site, but just to the south of that bulkhead, it's a large boulder stone revetment embankment that provides the erosion protection, for that particular area. So the fact that we have an outfall pipe going into that revetment, I'm not concerned with any erosion that's going to result from that particular area, simply because that entire embankment consists of large boulders and stones.
Let me just follow up on that, Mr. Weiwei. It appears, I'm not an engineer, but it appears like there's some measure of distance between where the boulders are shown on the drawing and where the outflow is. Why is the outflow not on the boulders?
The outfall is shown right at the edge of, is shown right at the edge of the revetment. So you've got the pipe and then you've got the flared end. And the end of the flared end is hitting the, I guess, the outer limits of that stone revetment.
Okay, what is the other device that's below that and to the east? Mary Rose, could you maybe help me with the mouse? What is that?
The east?
So that's what Mr. Weiwei is discussing, but what's the device below that? That's right below.
This is the outfall.
Go down. What is that device? Keep going to the right. What is that?
That is a catch basin at the cul-de-sac. So that's basically the low point of the cul-de-sac. So that's collecting the runoff from the pavement area, and that gets redirected back to a manhole and then to the water quality structure.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I believe we have a picture of that area in Ms. Geno's report. Give me just a second.
And we did have a site walk through you, Mary Rose. We did.
We do have some very quick videos. There we go. Here's the. So guide me, Mr. Weiwei, but I believe the outfall would be up in here somewhere near this tree.
We're not seeing what you're sharing yet.
Oh, that would be helpful, wouldn't it? Here is the bulkhead, the metal bulkhead. This is the stone.
Yeah, the outfall is actually up near the bulkhead. It's closer to the bulkhead than it is to that tree.
Okay, so it's in this area here.
It's in that general area there, correct?
Right. If you would bear with me for just a second. Let's see how this works. Is this the general area, Bob?
It's hard to tell from that. I don't know what the vantage point of that photo, of that particular photo is.
Okay, we're going to have a short video. Be kind to your wetland agent who's not a videographer. 1500 windward. We're approximately at the outflow. Look at our proposed outflow location.
That would be it, because there's the bulkhead and then the stone revetment is right next to it.
I guess my follow-up point would be, and my recommendation would be for that to be very intentional, because from what we saw in pictures, it was a mixture of boulders and dirt. And I would just implore you to make sure that there's no potential erosion similar to the bulkhead erosion that's just in the adjacent area. That would be my last point on that. I am interested, as Mr. Munson stated, I'm looking for additional input from Mr. Panico and from Mr. DiFumeri and Mr. Bedeker, and I do have a further question for Ms. Benno after that.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, through you, I just had one last quick question.
No problem, Mr. Connors, go ahead.
So judging if we are within jurisdiction or not, just for the sake of information with the water quality structure, I just want to know, in terms of the device, how does it separate? Does it separate oil from sediment? Is this cleaned regularly? Certain questions like that. Is it like, in any way, does it eat up organic material? Like, does it have microorganisms that clean up in some sort of way? I know the engineer mentioned that, I'm sorry, I forget the name.
Mr. Weiwei, all very good questions, Mr. Connors.
Mr. Weiwei, and just in terms of, I know you said 97% efficiency, but in terms of what, like, does it clean oil? Does it clean pollutants of all sorts, or is it strictly sediment? I just want to understand that.
Yeah. The water quality structure is basically a particulate and an oil separator. So it works on a hydrodynamic swirl concentrator type of technology. So the stormwater comes into there. It's a 2-compartment structure, And okay, yeah, Mary Rose just pulled the detail up. So what you can see on there is that you basically have two sets of chambers. The inlet pipe comes in a swirl manner concentrator. The sediments and particulates are separated out in one, and then the oils are captured in the second. Now, obviously, with these types of structures, as well as any type of stormwater management practice, for that matter, everything requires maintenance. Because again, if you think about it, if you're capturing and removing pollutants from the waste stream, what happens to those pollutants? They get tied up inside of the water quality structure, and they do need to be periodically maintained. We did put together a maintenance program for that, and typically the structures would be cleaned out on a annual basis, and usually what's recommended for the first year of operation, that 2 cleanings take place, and then it be monitored after that to verify if a more frequent nature needs to be performed on the maintenance. And that's going to be predicated on basically on the amount of sediments that are coming down through the storm drain system, whether you have a heavy winter with the sands accumulating. That would be certainly one thing. In the case of oil drippings, if there's something that took place on site, if somebody was changing their oil in the pan just over topped and got into the storm drainage system, it would all be collected and tied up in that water quality structure. So there is a protocol for doing the maintenance on that. They have certain maintenance companies would come out. They would clean the facilities, take records of how deep the sediment levels were within the structure. And then based on those inspections, you would put together your program moving forward as to whether or not you would need to do more frequent inspections, or if they could get lengthened out to a longer period of time. But generally speaking, the recommendation is to have it done on an annual basis. And usually that would be done in the springtime, once after you've gotten through your last set of snow melts, because again, with the sediments, the bulk of your sediments are going to get built up over the winter from any sanding operations that are taking place on site.
Thank you very much. And just in regards to my personal opinion, Mr. Chairman, as far as the bioswale area, I think that's a great improvement as to far as what is already there between the plantings and but my one other small concern Mr. Munson brought up was the large lawn. And in terms of obviously the fertilizer, pesticides, if that is used, if maybe there could be some sort of plantings. And again, this is all based on determination if we are within jurisdiction, but maybe plantings along the edge closer to the river that would capture certain things like that.
Yeah, great questions, Mr. Connors. Thank you, Mr. Leeway, for your insights and insightful response. By the way, I would just tag on to what you just said, Mr. Connors. I actually think that the design, the intention of the swale is a very clever design. It prevents a lawn area, which then leads to future potential problems. Actually, I think that's what they've done is something very clever that we've seen in other applications that we like. So I don't think there's any lawn area, to be honest. It doesn't seem like it seems very, very minimal.
What about the area north of that swale? It says a lawn. How big is that? I can't really see.
I think it's very small. I could be wrong, but Ms. Benno could clarify that. But
that's also one of the areas I'm recommending to have that unmowed vegetated strip. So that actually would probably take up any nutrients that could be coming out of there. And the intention is to provide additional buffer and not have a lawn area, and to provide additional wildlife habitat along the river. So that's why we made that recommendation. So I can't tell you, the square footage of the lawn area. Maybe Codispoti could do that, but I can't do that right now.
I think it's fine. I don't think, Mr. Connors, you need to know the square footage, right? Yeah. So I'd like to give an opportunity for other commissioners to ask questions or offer your perspective on whether we have jurisdiction or not.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to, so what I was wondering if, in case we don't have jurisdiction in here and DEP claims that they do they have to proceed and get a permit from the DEP?
Mayor Rose, I believe that's a question for you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, DEP would regulate any work in their tidal wetlands. And through the coastal area management process in the Planning and Zoning Board, review any other work. Mr. Miwa or Mr. Bellis could speak to their process with the state, but it does not appear at this point that they're proposing any work in the tidal wetlands. If other work in this area would require DEP and others permitting. But I believe Attorney Bellis and Mr. Miwa could speak to the CAM process and so on.
Yeah, what I'm trying to suggest is that either one of the agencies has to give an approval. Either it's our jurisdiction or somebody else's jurisdiction to approve this.
Yeah, I'll be glad to address your question. As Mary Rose said, we're not seeking a permit for any activity in the wetland area. We came before your commission because when you get a special permit, you have to go before the Wetlands Commission so they can review the application. If you determine that there's no jurisdiction, that's okay. We came before you, you saw the project, you determined that there's no jurisdiction, that's fine. We would not have to go to DEP to answer your question. We came to you because that's what the Connecticut statute says. When you get a special permit, you must file maybe not an application, but you have to give the Wetlands Commission an opportunity to review what you're doing. And that's what we're doing.
I understand.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Panico. Any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, Brandon, I have a couple of thoughts on this.
Yep, Mr. Connors, go for it.
I think that my personal opinion is I think the plan is very good. I think it's actually going to enhance the existing development there, because any water that finds its way down that road, Windward Road, is, if I'm correct, it pitches towards here, is going to go through this filtration system, where it is not doing that now. This was built back in the 80s and 90s. And also they've handled the snow removal and I'll call it the salting in an intelligent manner. I know I deal with this next to the wetlands also. So I think it's handled very well. And I think it's very minimal whether we have any wetlands there with the type of soils that have been there, the disturbed soils for many, many, many years. If there was a wetland, it's been destroyed many, many years ago. And it's questionable whether we do have jurisdiction, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Connors. And as a person who's been on the board 25 years, have you seen anything similar to this?
Yeah, Great River Golf Course was right on the river. That was quite a few years ago, 15, 16 years ago, but it was even more complex than this.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for your testimony and your input. Mr. Panico, were you through? Did you have any other points you wanted to raise? I didn't want to.
No, I think I appreciate all this amount of information and the care about all the planting, the drainage. I think it's very well done by all the professionals. I don't have any more comments.
Thank you. Mr. DeFumeri, do you want to weigh in?
Thank you. I like the project. I think it's very well designed. The only question I really have, and I ask if it's part of the bulkhead, who has jurisdiction over the bulkhead? We've seen some rust and some erosion in that area. So maybe you could clarify that. Who has jurisdiction on it?
It would be east of the mean high watermark, so that would be DEEP. Did I pass that test, Mary Rose?
Other than it's west of the mean high water mark, yes. The Houstonic River's on the west.
Have they taken a look at this lately? No.
I'm not sure, but Mr. Mary, I did make a mental note. I do believe Mr. Bellis did say at one point, this is just informational, it doesn't really affect us. I believe there was a comment made that some of the funding that's derived from this investment will be used in the future to repair that area. But again, that's not really in our purview, so
yeah,
I think it's kind of informational, but any other further questions, Mr. DeFamari?
no, that's fine.
How about Mr. Bedecker? Do you have anything to add?
Yes, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Everything I've heard, we do not have jurisdiction over this, so that's all I see.
That's your determination, okay.
Yeah.
Is Mr. Bave still on?
Yes, I'm here.
Commissioner Bave, yes, go ahead. Do you have anything to add?
Well, actually, I would have liked to know more about the storm sewer system, but I agree with Commissioner Bedecker that I don't think we have a jurisdiction, so I don't have any questions.
Great, okay. I'm in agreement with the determination that we've derived. My only two comments are I, as a general rule, appreciate the applicant's professionalism and all of your experts that have testified before us and all the preparation. You have treated this as an application that we did have jurisdiction on, and we've made the determination, and we'll entertain a motion around that in a moment. But I do want to commend you for coming before the board in the way you have. And I want to again thank the public for participating in this process, both those who are speaking in favor and opposed. Mr. Munson.
Yeah, I have just a quick informational question for Jen Benno.
Go ahead, speak.
Yeah, through you. Jen, I'd like to know the, in your letter, you say if the mortality rate of the plantings is greater than 15%, planting should be replaced. Is that something that is that a 15% a number that you picked or that you felt is proper for this particular thing, or is it something of an industry standard within your profession?
Yeah, that's generally what we recommend for all projects that have plantings, and it's fairly common on other projects I've seen other consultants work on and recommend.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Munson. I do have a follow-up question, just a very quick one for Ms. Benno. It's more of a question about the approach, just given the concern about invasives. Will there be proper removal of the invasive if this application is approved through the course of performance? There will be, I suppose, removal, professional removal. That is part of the application's plan, correct?
Well, yeah, there will be removal, when the clearing occurs. We do recommend in the report that invasives be removed as necessary. So that would be like as soon as they are identified, they would be removed from planting areas in the project site as part of the regular grounds maintenance. So that's one of our recommendations.
Thank you. And I wanted to highlight that just from seeing other applications in the past, I would implore the agency, so whoever's in charge and maybe listening here, make the maintenance plan, the ground maintenance plan, make that a part of your process of removing invasives. They're difficult sometimes to do. So with that, I guess at this point, Mary Rose, two questions I have for you. Just as an expert staff, we do need to close the public hearing, I believe, as a technical matter, if we haven't already. And then we need to entertain a motion for determining jurisdiction. Is that right?
At this time, the agency needs to, and they seem to have, decide if they've got all the information they need from the applicant. Once we feel, the agency feels that they have all the information that they need from the applicant and upon which to make a decision, we would close the public hearing and begin deliberations.
Okay, let me ask the question of the agency. Does everybody have the information they need?
Yes, I do.
Okay, seeing none, seeing no issues, seeing no concerns, I entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I will make that motion.
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, the public hearing has been closed. At this time, we've had a lot of good interaction with the applicants and ourselves. We do have several motions that have been drafted by our staff to pick from at this time. As I would entertain.
I'll make a motion that I think is the correct one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, before you make the motion, I find myself wrestling with it in terms of precedent. Do we want to set the precedent based on selective language in terms of, so we're just going based on what the soils findings were, right? But in terms of 100 feet from a water course, we are technically 100 feet minus the tidal wetlands, correct? So it's kind of like we're selecting what gives us jurisdiction. I just want to make sure that we as an agency want to set that precedent now in terms,
I don't think we said it. I think the DEP has set this.
No, I understand. I understand the area that DEP has control over, but within 100 feet of the river itself, beyond the sliver that the DEP has, we should have technical jurisdiction, I believe. That's what I find myself wrestling with. So if we could just.
Providing that there's inland wetlands in the area, and there isn't.
And with the soils that's there, it's really not a wetlands.
Right.
Gotcha.
That's the distinguishing factor here. In my mind, it's very black and white. I don't think we're setting precedent in that way.
I'm correct on that, right?
But the water course, even with the water course present, we don't technically need the soil, do we?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay.
We do. Yeah.
So then based on that language, it's strictly about the soil then.
Without the soil.
Mary Rose,
Right.
Mary Rose.
We are the Inland Wetlands and Water Courses Agency. But in areas, it has to do with jurisdiction. The territorial jurisdiction of Connecticut DEP is the mean high water line. So while our municipal border goes to the center of the river, the way the language states that our territorial border is mean high water. So we can't take jurisdiction in somebody else's territory. So we have to start from mean high water and go landward and find our jurisdiction. We have a soil scientist whose testimony is in the record that there are no inland wetlands and water courses on the site. The soils map shows that there's no inland wetlands and water courses on the site. We can't snap our 100-foot line to anything because we don't have something that's in the statute that we regulate to base the 100-foot line on.
So just to clarify, I'm just trying to understand it in my mind for this decision. So that title, the area that the state has basically makes the water course invisible to us?
That's how it was described to me. So you black out from mean high water, in this case, west, and then look mean high water landward and find your jurisdiction. Could be a floodplain or alluvial soil. It could be an intermittent water course. It could be a vernal pool. It could be any of those things. But if you don't find it statutorily, you don't have jurisdiction.
Understood.
I'm glad that you asked, Mr. Connors. It's definitely a distinction that we're making. We haven't had something this exact condition in a long time. So, Mr. Connors, did you want to make a motion?
I will do that, sir. Mr. Chairman, after duly considering all relevant factors and based on a review of the information in the file and presented at this meeting, I move that this application is not under MIWA jurisdiction. The compliance officer will respond as such to the Planning and Zoning Board transmittal with the following recommendations. Soil erosion and sedimentation controls as outlined on the plans and in the Connecticut DEP 2002 erosion and sedimentation control guidelines must be installed and maintained on the site until the property is stabilized. Erosion control recommendations outlined in the city engineer's memo dated 2/14/22. Planting and invasive species control recommendations as included in the soil science and environmental services report dated 1/19/22. That is my motion.
Motion has been made. Do we have a second on the motion?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
We have a second from Mr. DiFumeri. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Mayor Rose, are there any recommendations that you would add to the motion that we've discussed this evening?
Mr. Weiwei had discussed the maintenance plan for the stormwater and the water quality system. I think perhaps we may want to recommend to planning and zoning that they
Incorporate that.
get a regular schedule for the stormwater maintenance. Typically, Codispoti does put that in and puts it on their plans, but we may want to highlight that for zoning.
I'd entertain a motion to amend the main motion.
I make that motion.
Okay, make amendment.
To add Mary Rose's recommendation.
Do we have a second on the amendment?
Second.
Second from Mr. Connors. Any further discussion on the amendment to the main motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the amendment to the main motion?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstains? Okay, the amendment to the main motion carries. Going back to the main motion, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstains? The motion carries unanimously. At this time, I'd like to thank the applicants for participating in the process. Mary Rose will be in touch. Thank you for your time this evening and all the work you've done before this evening.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing, Brandon. There's one other application was very similar to this, was a Baldwin Crossing further up the river.
Baldwin Crossing, okay. Thank you, Mr. Connors.
Okay.
And thanks to all the public who has been part of this process. Again, I appreciate your participation in the process. At this time, we'd ask for the regular meeting to commence, the regular meeting and agenda items. So agenda item E, consideration of the minutes for the previous meeting. That was the February 16th meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
No issues. I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made. Do we have a second on the motion?
Second.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstains?
I abstain.
Thank you.
Me
Motion
too.
carries. Okay, we've got 2 abstains. Motion carries. Mary Rose, do you want to give us an abbreviated staff report?
Yes. All right, thank you all. I know it was a difficult evening. We had a bit of a long night tonight. For items we have before us, we're starting to get busy. We've gotten our first pool application. We're starting to work through those things. I may have a couple other things for you for our next meeting. Site status wise, I did actually get to speak to the owner of Tanglewood Circle today, and he will contact me for a walk, which is the same thing we've been saying for 6 months. Bridgeport Avenue is waiting on an as-built. Florence Avenue hasn't taken the permit out. Maddox Avenue, the bond's been released. Merwin Avenue is ongoing. Pearl Street's ongoing. Terrace Road is complete, waiting as-built review. West Rutland Road, there was a complaint about erosion. There's anti-track pad needs to be maintained. I spoke with the developer yesterday, and we're walking the site to see the newly maintained anti-track pad Friday morning. Wheeler's Wood is complete. We need to go through a little bit of the paperwork, but you'll be seeing that bond released soon. Cemetery has been stabilized for the winter. Marsh Street's taken out their permit and has started. And late this afternoon, the condominium project at 690 New Haven Avenue took their permit out.
690 or 620?
Yeah, it's 690, so typo.
Okay. Any questions for Mary Rose?
Oh,
Okay. Okay, moving on to Chair's report. Just as a reminder, the next meeting will be March 16th via Zoom. And an emphatic thank you for everyone's participation this evening. It was something we should all be proud of. Very good deliberation and a lot of good questions, even considering the jurisdiction issue. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
you have it.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Who was the second on that motion? Was it it was Munson?
Mr. Munson.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. If you have any questions, please call me or email me.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.